Welcome to Garden Masterclass. Good to have everyone here. My name is Richard Court, and I am co-hosting with Claire Greenslade this evening. Annie and Noel are away. So do bear with us while we take care of our tech abilities, and we'll be with you very soon with Jack and Claire. I'm going to do some housekeeping for you. Welcome one and all to the garden chat. I think all three of us have come from the garden. Literally, I'm sitting here with muddy trousers, but you can't see. So wherever you're joining us from, welcome. It's great to have everybody here. Diary coming up. I'm going to do a few slots for you. On the 30th of November, we've got Shade with Noel. So tune in for that. That's the 13th of November, Everything Shade with Noel. Noel Kingsbury, of course. 26th of November, you've got Euphorbias with Dan Whitten. So one of my favorite plants. So many to choose from. I find them very comforting in the garden. I don't know about anybody else. So yeah, that's certainly one I'm going to be tuning into as well as the shade one, in fact, because I'm all on shade in my garden. And then we've got 4th of December. We've got down here, we've got Design versus Management with James Hitchmo, which is a really interesting one. I find a big issue, I think. Should be one of the biggest issues in the industry in a way, just in terms of sustainability and how one is dealing with design and sustaining that management of a site for 5-10 years in the future. James will be talking about that. That's going to be really interesting, and that's something he's really passionate about. So yeah, and a couple more things. Substack is now a feature with Garden Masterclass, so you can tune into the podcasts there. All of these podcasts and other writings. So there's a Substack account that you can find everything Garden Masterclass on there if you don't know about Substack. Scribehound is a new group of 30 garden writers, which is very exciting, given free rein to write about whatever they choose, which I think they're all very excited about. Just going to admit somebody in here. So that's Scribehound, new one for me as well. So that's a lot of fabulous garden writing. And then new podcasts coming up for members only. And that's through the newsletter, I think Noel was saying. So lots to for your gardening taste buds, basically, to feast on for whenever you need. But without further ado, I think we're probably ready, and I can hand over to Claire to introduce our speaker this evening, Jack Hogg. Thanks, Claire.
Hi there. Hello, thanks, Richard. So we've got Jack with us today, and Jack is the head gardener of York Gate Garden, which I have to admit I've never been to, so I'm really looking forward to hearing all about it. Which is up near Leeds. That's right, isn't it? You're in.
It's in Leeds. Yeah, it's just the outskirts of Leeds in a little village called Addle.
Well, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about it because it's one of the perennial gardens, of which there are only 3. So there's Fuller's Mill in Suffolk and the Lascett Gardens now in Herefordshire. And the perennial project, for those of you who don't know, is really it's a really great charity dedicated to helping people that are in horticulture. So I have actually used them before for advice. They are really good for offering advice if you're in a bit of a sticky situation work-wise, or have money issues going on, or just need general support. They've even got health on there. Career building, how to sort of do CVs. It's a really useful charity for gardeners or horticulturists, however you want to be described. And so I think let's just hear all about it. We're going to, if you want to add into the chat any questions as we go through, and then Richard and I can go through those at the end, if that's all right with you, Jack.
Yeah. Okay, so I suppose a little bit about myself first to start with. So my name's Jack Hogg. I'm the head gardener at York Gate Garden. I have always been in horticulture. I left school and got a job in a garden centre, and then I was a landscape gardener. I did various other nursery gardening roles. And then I was very fortunate, I think, to get onto the PGG, Professional Gardeners Guild scheme. And I was one of a couple of trainees that were picked, and that was probably 16 years ago, showing my age maybe of this one. And I had half my time split between Harewood House, which is a big historic house, again in Leeds, and York Gate Garden. I had, well, my then partner, now wife, had our first child, my first son, Ellis, while I was doing that training. So I had to give up that training because Ellis was ill and had to spend time in hospital. So I had to stop doing that. And I was very fortunate that the head gardener at Harewood House, Trevor Nicholson, offered me a role there. And I was a gardener at Harewood, looking after the lakeside and the Himalayan garden for about 9 years. I was there for. So I was really fortunate with that one. Roughly 7 years ago, I got a call from the then head gardener at York Gate Garden, a fellow called Ben Preston. He now owns Cliffbank Nursery. He's left and has set up a nursery called Cliffbank. He phoned me up out of the blue. He'd not met me before, and asked me to come for an interview. I went for the interview, and there was a number of us, and I was, again, lucky that I got that role. And I've been at York Gate ever since. I started as the senior gardener there and became the head gardener. And then when our garden manager left, I moved up to be the garden manager as well, which kind of is the head gardener in a way. I do the role of the head gardener and the garden manager as well. So I oversee some of the other bits on the site as well, the cafe and the shop and the nursery, though we do have a cafe manager who is fantastic. So I have to do very little there. And our nursery team is also absolutely wonderful. So you know, it's overseeing those kind of bits, but I am the head gardener, really. I suppose that's enough about me. York Gate Garden, it is a 14-room arts and crafts style garden on the outskirts of Leeds, in a little village called Addle. It was created by the Spencer family in the 50s. It was, I think, 1951 that the family bought York Gate Farm and decided that they didn't want it to be a farm and they wanted to create a wonderful garden. And it's that 14-room arts and crafts style garden that myself and my amazing team of gardeners and nursery people look after today. So Perennial, they used to be known, or they're originally known as the Gardeners Royal Benevolent Society, and now known as Perennial. And they were set up originally. There was our Perennial marketing department might tell me off for this because I might not have this exactly down, but I will do my best with this one. So there was some gardeners that got together, had a meeting in a pub in London. It was actually in 1839. They got together and decided that gardeners that were tied into their houses, so head gardeners that worked for big estates, had a tied-in accommodation, and then when they retired and finished, they had nowhere to go and they were kicked out of that house. So Perennial was originally set up to house those head gardeners and those gardeners that were in tied accommodation. So Perennial is the UK's only charity supporting all of those working in the horticultural community, as well as those who have retired. and who have dedicated their passion, their time, their energy to keeping Britain beautiful by offering the right information, the support at the right time that is needed. The charity aims to build better lives for those within the horticultural industry and who have been doing it for over 185 years. So pretty good charity, and everybody that they help there basically. And obviously that might not be the full list. If there's anybody else that works in horticulture that comes to mind, then you know it's worth giving Perennial a shout if you feel they need to. Perennial set up annual dinners for basically the raising money to start with when they first set up. So they got in the then celebrities of the day, and I think probably the most famous celebrity of the day. If I hadn't messed up all of this PowerPoint stuff before, I would have done Charles Dickens' voice as I read this out, but I'm not sure it's the right setting for this one. So maybe I'll leave that one and not do that. But you can read that yourself there. So as I say, Perennial's work started out as head gardeners, and now it's helping basically anybody within the industry. So Perennial is needed now more than it ever has been. There's a significant increase in demand for our services. In 2023, the increase was a staggering 17%. Currently in 2024, we experienced a further 15% increase. So the economical pressures, rising fuel, equipment costs, that kind of thing, it's difficult for gardeners at the moment, particularly self-employed gardeners. So, you know, the help is there, Perennial is there, and they're not, we've got lots of caseworkers. And I personally, as I think you said, Claire, I've got a bit of experience with Perennial. When I set up my own gardening business, not very successful gardening business, many years ago, with a friend of mine, and I was really struggling, and I contacted Perennial, and they were there, and a lady called Helen, who's one of the caseworkers, came out to see me and advised me on how to manage things and how to do stuff. So I am maybe not with my technical skills, but potentially a bit of almost a poster boy for Perennial, because I started out as a trainee. I've had their help, and I've worked up, and I'm a garden manager at potentially, in fact, obviously biased, the best small garden in the country. Certainly the best small garden in the north, but I would say in the country, maybe even the world. So, as Claire said, currently Perennial have a few different gardens. We've got Yorkgate first, and then we took on Fuller's Mill, which is on the River Lark. It was given to us by Bernard Tickner. Then there's the Lasket down in Hereford, which was Sir Roy Strong's garden, and we've got that one now. That's another one of Perennial's gardens. We now have a garden called Mona's Garden, which is in central London. Mona is a opera singer, and she's got the National Collection of Carokia, which, if you don't know Carokias, they kind of look a bit like cross between a Cotoneaster and some barbed wire. Big, tangly, I think they're from New Zealand, bushes, and she's got the National Collection of, certainly a huge collection of. And then we are hopefully, in fact, I think we are definitely taking on East Ruston. So Alan Gray and Graham Robeson's garden, with that wonderful wash garden with all the agaves and various other things, and a fantastic garden. And that is also going to be one of Perennial's gardens. So we're going to get quite a few in the bag, basically, which is really good. And then obviously the trainees that are at Yorkgate will be able to work in different gardens, and their trainees will be able to come up to Yorkshire and work at Yorkgate as well. So it's it's an exciting prospect to have all of these different gardens coming on board, basically. This is a slightly cliche one, and I'm not sure these volunteers will thank me for using their pictures, but I've used them anyway, and they can tell me off next Thursday when they're in. This is Margaret and Joe. They are Gardens volunteers, Thursday Gardens volunteers, and as I said, I've got a really good team of staff. There's the admin staff, and there's the cafe staff, and the garden and nursery staff. But Yorkgate wouldn't run and wouldn't be what it is without the huge team of volunteers that we have there. We've got roughly about 180 volunteers, and they do guided tours of the garden. They do admissions, the shop. They work in the cafe. They work in plant sales. They work obviously in the garden, harvesting the lovely produce that we produce in the kitchen garden. So again, slightly cliche, but Yorkgate is a proper family garden still. Even though it's not owned by a family, it feels like a family to me, especially, and I like to think to all of the Yorkgate staff and volunteers all like it as well. We've got loads, as I say. This is, so the lady on the far right of your screen is one of our old trainees, Amy, and then next to her is Ellie, who is one of the nursery staff, basically, and they were doing a tour for some of the garden volunteers on this day. Well, some of the volunteers of the whole site. So what I normally do on my talks, when I go to garden groups, do talks, I do almost a virtual tour of the garden, as if you started in the car park and you worked your way through the garden. And I considered doing that for this, but because of the people that might be watching this, I thought I can get away with being slightly geekier. So I've focused in a bit more on some more plants on this, and I've got quite a few pictures of some interesting plants, some technically standardly beautiful plants, and some incredibly weird, could be boring, but really interesting for me plants. But there's a few shots of garden rooms. So when you first enter Yorkgate, the first room that you come to is the pillar garden. And it's the pillar garden because it's got 13 beech columns and then 2 big herbaceous borders with various different things in. The pillar garden has to look good year round, or certainly right up until the end of the year, because Yorkgate, as an open garden to the public, closes at the end of October. So if the garden isn't looking up to scratch after the end of October, it doesn't matter too much. Whereas our cafe, which is that building at the end there, is open right up until Christmas. So that you walk through the pillar garden to get to the cafe. So we've used lots of plants that hold winter structure really well. There's Philiptronellin and various asters and some sanguisorbas that hold their winter structure really well. And then obviously late flowering asters. I'm going to put a load of Helianthus lemon queen through it as well, because it's one of my favorite plants. It's a huge, big perennial sunflower that I'm sure everybody knows. It's not the most unusual plant, but it's a fantastic thing. And it's late flowering, it holds its own, and it's very vigorous. So we'll be able to run it down this border, and you'll have that splash of yellow right up until, well, it's still flowering now in the garden, so it will still be good. So this is where those cars are. I don't know, can you see me as well as see the screen? Yeah. Where those cars are is where the pillar garden is. So Yorkgate Garden is the building on the left-hand side, and you can see the garden all around it. There's kitchen garden, you can see the yew sails, the various other rooms of the garden, and the building on the right is a building that was originally part of Yorkgate Farm, and then the family sold it off to fund their gardening habit, and sold it to a family, and somebody lived in that property. A lady called Molly lived in that property for years until she moved to a retirement home, and she gave Perennial first dibs to buy that property back. And we did. We bought it back, and we built the pillar garden where those cars are and where the road is that goes through. That's where our plant sales nursery is. And the garden at the front, which is a lawn, we've turned into probably our most experimental garden. We dug out the lawn, dug everything out, dug it down, so it's a sunken garden. And then we created, it's had a few different names. We called it the Mediterranean garden, the sun garden. We've settled on the sand garden because it is a garden entirely consisting of sand. So garden designer, a fellow called Alistair Baldwin, designed the hard landscaping around there, and it's in keeping with the old Spencer garden. So lots of circles, because the Spencers have millstones in just about every room. So there's that circle motif carries on in the new side. Also, you can just see down at the bottom, this is Ben Preston on the left-hand side with the hard hat. And just below him, you can see some slates stacked up on the wall. And that is copying a design that the Spencers did in another part of the garden, in the old Spencer garden. So Alistair and his team took bits of the Spencers design and designed the hard landscaping for what is now the sand garden. So me and Ben, we went to I think it was the first of the Beth Chatto symposiums. We saw a nurseryman, Swedish nurseryman called Peter Korn speak, and he grows everything in sand. He grows lots of other things as well, but it grows in big sand beds, raised sand beds, in various different ways of growing in sand. And we thought, that's ace. We're going to give that a go. We're going to try and recreate and try and grow things in sand in Yorkshire. So we built a sand garden basically, and it's probably well over a metre of solid sand at the back, and then a little bit shallower at the front. And it is solid washed river sand with sandstone boulders from a quarry that's a mile away from the garden. So it's all locally sourced sand and rock, and we created the sand garden, which is what it sounds like. All of the plants following Peter Korn's method. I know it's not just his method. There are other people that have done it as well, and other people that have done this kind of idea. There's a fellow that's on Instagram that does it fairly regularly, and I can't remember what he's called, like a rewilding guy, but I should have remembered his name. Never mind. When we are planting the plants in the sand, we wash all of the soil off, all of the compost off the roots of the plants, and they are planted directly into the sand. And this is for a number of reasons. If you leave a root ball, composty root ball around the plant, the roots might stay in that composty root ball and not escape out into the sand. And then if we do get drought, if it is really dry, then those roots haven't escaped and haven't made a decent root system to hold their own. Also, if we do get a lot of dry weather, which with the changing climate, we might get the ultra dry summers or really soggy summers, depending on whatever the weather decides to do, that ball of compost might become hydrophobic, and then it dries out, and that's difficult for the plants. In the winter, if they have a ball of compost, you will get heaving. As that compost freezes, it will push it out of the ground. So there's a number of reasons why we do it, but it is a reasonably new but tried and tested method. We've been really successful with lots of plants. Some that I assumed would do really well have just died, and other ones that I thought wouldn't be a good sand to just grow, good plant to just grow in pure sand have have rocketed away. So it's definitely a bit of a horticultural experiment for us, really, but definitely an interesting one. So the sand garden is a circle. It consists of 4 beds. There's a huge bed with olive trees in and agaves and various other bits, and then a very thin bed. And opposite the sand garden, there was 2 other beds that we didn't really know what to do with. We did annual borders and we did a perennial border in there. But whatever we did really jarred with the sand garden, because the sand garden is so bonkers looking and it is pure sand and rock. So what we did is we created basically another sand garden opposite the sand garden, and it has, rather than being solid sand, it's a mulch of sand on top of our subsoil. So again, we can try a few different things and experiment with different plants. The Amaryllis belladonna, the only hardy Amaryllis other than Amanarine that we've had a bit of success with, does really well in the solid sand. We've put it in the sand mulch side and it's died away. So, you know, some of it has worked. And again, this is tulip Clusiana stellata, which is a really nice tulip. If you don't grow this one, you should definitely grow that. There's a few different types of Clusiana var chrysantha with the yellow outsides and the pink 3 outers is fantastic as well. And this has been one that did okay in the sand for a couple of years, but is slowly fading out. Whereas on the damper side, where it's just a mulch of sand on top of the subsoil, the tulips are surviving a bit better because they've got a bit more moisture and a bit more nutrients maybe. So it's definitely an experiment for us. Very good. We've planted various different bulbs, taking inspiration from holidays and pictures and just researching what plants we think might do really well. Some of the cyclamen that I assumed would be fantastic in there would love that kind of situation, because you think of them Mediterranean, under an olive tree, you're going to get cyclamen. And they're there, they survive, but they're not doing very well. Whereas some of the crocus species, this is Crocus speciosus, Crocus orange monarch, have done fantastically well and really good. So other than getting predated by squirrels and mice, they love the solid sand. So it's well worth trying. We've even planted Galanthus gracilis, and that seems to be coping really well in the solid sand. So it's definitely trial and error for us to see what works and what isn't going to work, but an interesting experiment. This is Allium flavum, probably one of my favourite bulbs that we've added into the sand. Check where I am. So potentially the best plant, not in the whole garden, but certainly in the sand garden for me, is this one. This is Agave montana. This is a plant that was donated to us by a fellow called Joel, who comes and visits the garden fairly regularly. He was moving house. This is the plant in his garden. And me and Ben went round to Joel's house because he was moving and he couldn't move this plant. And we dug this thing up. It took us a good few hours with wrecking bars and spits to try and get this plant out of Joel's garden and bring it back and plant it in our sand garden. I still have the scars to this day, and I'm sure Ben has the same. Those spikes on the end of those leaves are incredibly sharp, but it's a fantastic plant. I'm sure you all know a fella at Pan Global Plants, Nick Mesa. I was lucky enough to go. We went to Wildside Garden and the garden house, and on the way back we stopped at Pan Global and saw their Agave montanas there, and they're absolutely amazing. So I'm very proud that we have this huge plant, and I don't have an up-to-date picture of it, I don't think. So it's probably doubled in size since we've planted it, so it's enjoying life in the sand. We get asked a couple of times, do we dig it up? Do we lift it and bring it inside? And the answer is definitely no, because we wouldn't be able to, because we would all be cut to bits. So we build a shelter over the top of the plant that doesn't protect it from cold, so it can get down to freezing minus temperatures, but it protects it from snow and rain. So it's got a cover over the top of it, so when it snows and rains, it washes off and moisture doesn't gather in the crown of the plant and freeze solid. I recently went to Lullingston Castle, which is down in Kent, and they have agaves outside, unprotected, and they don't bother covering. Some of them they cover, and some of them they don't, and they can get away with it. Whereas in Yorkshire, in Leeds, we definitely have some pretty soggy, unpleasant weather in the winter, so we have to protect it from that winter wet. So, as I say, going away from that agave, we take our inspiration for parts of the sand garden for places that we've visited. My senior gardener, Tom, has actually been to Peter Korn's in Sweden and worked with Peter and his wife and family, and taken inspiration from that. And myself have travelled a few different countries of the world. One of the ones that stood out to me was the Algarve, was the sand dunes in the Algarve. This is my botanizing companion, my now 6-year-old daughter, who refuses to wear shoes, even though there's spiky plants around. But there was really interesting things to find in the sand dune that gave me real inspiration for what we might get away with growing in the sand at York Gate. So this is Muscari comosa, just growing in sand dunes right next to the sea. This is, I can never say the name of this plant right, Prospero autumnalis. This is actually growing in Jersey, Channel Islands, Jersey. But again, in a sand dune, growing in pretty much solid sand, other than the tiny bit of humus that's built up by leaves and dead plants going in. I had a bit of a dig around it to actually see what the soil was like, and it's solid sand. So then we go back to our sand garden and it's like, oh, well, we can grow muscaries in there. So we planted, I think it was about 1,500 Muscari azurium, which is this one on the screen. And it's been fantastic. It's done really well, and it increases every year, and isn't dying away like some of the other bulbs that we've tried. So definitely a good one for the solid sand growing. See where I am with this. So there's a little bit of a running theme that will that you'll notice if you ever come to any of my talks or hear me speaking about anything. A particular group of plants that I am very interested in are aroids, plants in the arum family. I mean, I've got if you can see me on screen, there's a Amorphophallus atroviridis behind me, and I've even got a cheese plant on my t-shirt to prove my point. Arums, actually the genus arum, I'm a big fan of. So we've planted loads throughout the sand garden. And they have been doing really well. They seem to really appreciate the deep, solid sand, particularly when we plant these tubers next to some of the rocks. They pull themselves deep and they grow and flower really well. This is Arum Dioscoridis var syricum. Might be butchering that name, but bear with me on this one. A fantastic plant. I've planted lots of it in the sand garden. This particular group is in my front garden at home, but this is the best picture I have of that plant, so it demonstrates it nicely. That is the tuber of that plant, and then the plant flowering. I didn't notice this plant was flowering at all. I knew it had buds, and then my wife phoned me up one day at work and told me that the bins need changing, that they're smelling really unpleasant, and I went, oh, go and sniff that plant near where the bins are. And I was nearly, all of my stuff was almost on the front lawn when I got home, but not quite. so I'm okay with that one. And this is another fantastic arum. This is the straight Arum Dioscoridis, rather than the Var syricum that's got more pale yellow spathe. This one's got much darker, richer purple tones to the flower. It's a fantastic thing. Flowers only last roughly a day and smell like a hot black bin or meat or dung, some of them, but definitely a really interesting group of plants to grow, in my opinion. Arum pictum. So Arum pictum is the only member, as far as I'm aware, and I think I'm right in saying, the only member of the Arum genus that flowers in the autumn rather than the spring. The rest of them, including our native Arum maculatum, flower in the spring, but Arum pictum flowers in the autumn and is fantastic. And it's also, there are a number of pictum cultivars that have got really beautiful markings to the leaves and a fantastic plant, well worth growing. They have always been touted, or when I first started reading into the genus, talked about as being slightly tender, but I've not found much tenderness with many of them. Arum creticum, this one, probably one of the nicest smelling in the genus, smells of citrusy primroses with a hint of dung. So the nicest that you can get is probably the most tender for me in the sand garden. It survives really well up against the Yorkgate building, but in the sand garden, it doesn't seem to be doing too well. And obviously coming from Crete, Creticum, you'd think it would like sharp drainage and sand, but not doing too well for us in that one. So again, wonderful leaves and winter interest with arums. So they get a bad reputation for some of the Italicum cultivars being weedy. You get, I mean, the straight Arum Italicum can be very weedy if it self-seeds, and it also produces offset tubers, which if you dig them up and move them around can end up everywhere. But they're absolutely vital for me. I wouldn't be without them in any garden. I've done various garden designs, private garden designs for people, and full sun, dry spots, deep shade. There's an arum for everybody, I think, if you look past the slightly smelly flowers, but still absolutely well worth it. So a few different plants that we grow in the sand. So this is Iris subiflora, and I was sent this plant from a friend in Portugal, and this is a wonderful plant. It's basically looks like a bearded iris, but it's only very squat. It's only probably a foot or so tall as it flowers, but the flower head is huge, and it's done very well for us again in the sand garden. Aloe striatula or Aloeampilos, or whatever they've changed it to now. It's not an aloe anymore. A very hardy plant for us, both in garden soil and in the sand garden. So I did warn you all that I'm talking more about plants rather than actual design in this, so it's, I think I'm getting away with it. Probably the best thing, the small boy in me that got me most excited plant that I grew in the sand is this one. This is the dead horse arum. I think it's pig butt plant in the States, but dead horse arum over here. Helicodicerus muscularis, I think you say it, but again, I might be well butchering that name. Not the hardiest of plant, but planted up against the wall in the garden, it's done very well, and it is incredibly unpleasant smelling. It comes from, I think it's the Balearic Islands, growing in seagull colonies. So it has to compete with the smell of guano and fish heads and rotting seagulls for its pollinators, which you can see on the flower. There's a blue bottle on it, and it gives you a clue as to the smell of the plant. But it's an amazing thing, and I was super proud to have that flowering outside, unprotected in Yorkshire. I might be wrong, but I think technically the Royal Yorkgate we could be the first to be flowering it outside, certainly in Leeds, maybe not in the country. People might get away with it in Cornwall, but really pleased to have that in the garden. Great plant. Evil looking. You can see here the number of flies that it's pollinated. So it's definitely an interesting thing. I'll move on away from disgusting things for a short amount of time, and then we'll move quickly back onto disgusting things, depending on
what we might have to do, Jack. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think because I think most people might want to finish at 7. What we might have to do is we're at 5:02. So we might have to flick through maybe a couple more really quickly. And if anyone's got any questions, pop them in the chat now, and then we can quickly sort it out, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's good. I'll go through a few then, right quick, just to give you a few tasters of some other bits of the garden. So we channel our inner Christo, and we do a big pot display at the front in the Maze Garden. The Maze Garden's fantastic, the first real room of Yorkgate that you enter. And it takes a bit to keep it steady. Then we move into I'll fly through these then and go quickly through these. Orchard Garden. Orchard Garden's got loads of really exciting plants in, some really nice things. And then you go through into the Pinetum, which I don't have pictures of because I just wanted to guess about interesting plants. So down into the Dell. The Dell is a woodland garden full of basically woodland plants from around the world. So we've got primulas from the Himalayas, Meconopsis, and we've got trilliums and aracemas and stilboides and veratrums and various other things, big patches of Paris. So very good, very interesting woodland plants. Probably my personal favorite tree that we planted in the Dell is this one. It went in quite small and it's done very well. Magnolia macrophylla, and you can see from I don't have giant hands, but that's a big leaf. Obviously, as the name implies, macrophylla, it's a pretty big magnolia, so definitely worth growing if you're into foliage. Leaving the Dell, swiftly on, you can see some of the vistas that the Spencer family set up in this very small 1-acre garden. This is one of the most famous ones, the carpet path, and you lead off to the left into Sybil's garden, the tropical garden, and to the right going where the canal is. Stone bowl at the end of the canal, and the stone bowl was originally on that arbour. We had to take it down because that arbour is now disintegrating. It was built in the 60s and it's falling apart. I do have a picture of the senior gardener holding that stone bowl. Tom is quite a big lad and he's holding that thing and it's pretty heavy. So we stuck it on the end of the canal. How long left have I got to waffle?
What do you reckon, Richard?
A couple minutes. I mean, it's really a shame to cut you short, to be honest. It's a really lovely talk and some gorgeous photos.
It's
but
okay.
I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure if we're going to be logged out at on the hour.
Well,
but yeah, carry on for now, Jack.
That's my fault because of all the technical nonsense at the start. So I apologise for that one. But so back into Sybil's garden. I should say I have a volunteer called Sam Booth who takes a lot of these wonderful pictures for me. I'm not bad at taking a picture, but I've got a volunteer who is a photographer extraordinaire, and he takes a lot of these pictures for me. So I have to give him a shout out for taking these. So Sybil's garden. Sybil's garden is a tropical garden, jungle garden. There's no actual tropical plants. They're all temperate things to give you a jungle vibe. There's 11 tree ferns. There's scheffleras and bananas. We've used lots of different ferns and hostas and various other things in there to give you that tropical feel. Obviously, tree ferns need wrapping up. So a Friday volunteer, a lady called Sue, built me these Hessian jackets for the tree ferns. and they're all made out of Colombian coffee bags. And each individual tree fern has got its own jacket with its name sewn into the back of it, and they've got wooden toggles, as you can just see down the front of one of these, to go on their own jacket. So they're really nice things, and they're ornamental in their own right, in my opinion. So I'll move swiftly on. Nettle family, I love the nettle family. So Boehmerias, I think you say it, and Pileas, Pilea umbrosa, Pilea insolens, wonderful foliage plants. And then we've used various other different tropical big leaf things in Sybil's garden. That one is
Amazing.
Podocanum emiens. People quite often think we're growing a Paulownia, but it's not. It's a tender plant called Podocanum. They were planted as litre pots, and this is how big they were when we dug them out at the end of last year. So they get big in 1 year, but well worth growing. Another aroid, favourite, definitely favourite. I think I've said everything's my favourite. Really hardy, moves itself around, repeat flowering, and smells like halitosis if you stick your nose in it. So look from a distance, but wonderful thing. This is Sorametum horsfieldii, but very hardy, really good woodland plant, and flowers profusely and beautiful foliage. So these are the leaves, sort of spirally purple tinged leaves, and then there's a green version with a green flower. Smells just as bad, but wonderful, very easy to grow. I'll move quickly through some of these then.
Yeah, no, go for it. We're 1 minute past 7 on my clock, and we haven't been, we haven't turned into pumpkins. So carry on, because it's really fabulous, and it'll be on the recording.
Okay.
You had a little video there.
I did. So
great.
Sorametum venosum, the standard voodoo lily, the one that people used to buy as a bulb and stick on your windowsill on a plate, and it would flower on your windowsill. I find very hardy in Yorkshire for me, so I've planted them all around Sybil's garden, the tropical garden, and a few down in the dell as well. And the only downside to them is they produce an evil smelling flower. And as you can see from the number of flies of the video, they are convincingly horrible smelling, but then you get this fantastic foliage afterwards. So it's worth growing. For me, it's worth growing because I find it really interesting. Plants using mimicry instead of reward. So they're not giving any nectar to visiting insects. They're pretending to be something else to confuse pollinators, and their pollinators in this case were bluebottles, but interesting. Best Sorametum that I have is this tiny one. This is Sorametum diversifolium, and it's again a really wonderful looking plant. You get a couple of flowers, but then really nice big divided leaves. And that might be the end of foul smelling things, but I'm not promising anything. Going out of Sybil's garden. So we have missed out a few rooms, and I've missed out a few different bits because I'm talking more about plants than the whole garden rather than a tour. You'll have to come to the garden and visit York Gate to get the full.
Absolutely, that's a very dramatic topiary.
Yeah, the yew sails, we call them. There's 6 big yew sails in the middle of the garden, and you can see them from just about every room of the garden. They're fantastic topiary, and they stand at the back of the main border, the main border in the carpet path. And the carpet path goes through various seasonal changes and works really hard for us. Some people call it the phlox border because it's at the end of the year, it's got this huge profusion of phlox, some of them hideous and some of them nice. So I am going to change some of the phlox that's in there. I like a phlox, but some of them are not the nicest, kind of skin coloured tones, and not the best. So another room with interesting topiary is the herb garden. This is obviously at the start of the year. It's got box spirals, which are currently completely infested in the box moth, and they've got box blight. So I'm in serious consideration now, rather than trying to tackle the pests, which sounds a little bit defeatist, like I'm giving up. But I think we're at a stage where I'm going to take the box spirals out and we're going to replace them with bay cones. And obviously bay in a herb garden works as well. And we could even potentially have bay spirals, though obviously it's got a much bigger leaf and doesn't clip as tight. But it would be in keeping and it would work with the herb garden. So another shot of the yew sails with the big Dowick beech in the background. And the Dowick or Doik beech is a fastigiate growing beech in the Pinetum, and it gives you this fantastic golden backdrop for the yews at this time of year. So it's a brilliant shot. It's one I like to add in when I'm doing talks this time of year, basically. So we've missed out a few gardens. There's the alley, and there's the kitchen garden, and there's the white garden. Again, you have to come and visit the garden. You have to come and see it, and you can see those rooms for yourself.
Absolutely, we're getting some really nice comments and people wanting to visit. So you're definitely doing a great job there.
Good. I'll stop doing the visit the garden tout then. I don't need to do that. Sorry, that's not what this is about.
No, it's great. I'm
about
definitely
talking
up
about
for
smelly
it.
plants. So that's what it's all about, really. So the room I want to speak about next, the final room that I'm going to speak about, is the paved garden. And the paved garden is a bit like the Ronseal paint. It is what it sounds like, and it's a garden with a load of paving in. And then it's got a few big borders. It's got 2 big gravel beds that we plant out all of the succulents and cactuses. And as you can see here, Eremurus went in a few years back, and they did pretty well for us. And the other side of the paved garden is a rockery, a lovely rockery with lots of alpine plants in. But it's a room at York Gate that has a split personality, basically, because it's not just a white garden, and it's not just an orchard garden. It's got gravel beds, it's got a rockery, and then it's got a succulent house with succulents and cactuses in. And as I say, we plant those succulents out. We use them in various different pot displays. You can see in this one, because this is right near our admissions into the garden, this Agave Americana, I think it's Albo marginata or something along those lines. We've had to clip all of the terminal spikes off all of the agaves because it would be lacerating visitors as they walk past. But it's still a really interesting plant to have in a pot display, and we do various different displays of the succulents. And because they're tender plants, we get to use them as bedding, and we can do different things with them every year. So it's a good. We've got a good selection of plants to do really interesting things with, and it's nice to vary that up each year. It's not a very stationary room, if that's even a way of explaining it at all. A bit of inspiration here, terrible picture, but a little bit of inspiration. So seeing this picture, this is a roof in Durrell Zoo in Jersey, covered in polypodium ferns growing all over the roof. And then this picture is aeoniums growing out of the roof in, I think it was Gran Canaria. So they are doing the same thing in the Canary Islands that plants over here would do. We would get buddleia growing in abandoned buildings here. They get aeoniums growing out of the roof there. So I took that idea, and the wall of the succulent house inside the greenhouse itself, it's almost a lean-to, it leans onto a big old stone wall. We take cuttings of different plants, succulent plants, wedge them into the cracks of the wall, and they've rooted and they've been growing quite happily and quite successfully. So in the summer, they close up, the aeonium rosette closes up really tight. And then in the winter, when the moisture returns and the weather is cooler, they open up again. And you can see various different spots. The aeoniums have rooted themselves into the cracks in the wall, and they've been there for probably about 4 years now, growing successfully. I get asked, have we added compost, or do we feed them? Do we water them? And the answer is no, I don't do anything to them. They're literally growing out of the mortar and the rock work and whatever moisture they can get from the old leaky wall that they're growing out of. So it's, again, using that inspiration from nature and trying it in your own garden, or trying it in a garden open to the public, but it's worth giving things a go. I don't have a picture of it at the moment, but the Chilean bromeliad, Fascicularia bicolor, everything that you should know about it, it should be growing in dry, arid places coming from Chile. And we stuck one in a tree trunk in the shade, in a tree down in the dell, and it's growing and flowering really happily. So it's worth experimenting with a few things. And I think that is almost about it. I've got a few other pictures of various interesting succulents, but I realise I've been speaking for a long time and I would just waffle on about extra smelly things again.
No, it's fantastic. As Rachel just said, well done for persevering with the tech, because it's been great.
Amazing seeing
So
those
thank you.
growing out of the wall was brilliant. That's really inspiring.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
That's really good. Or you've definitely made me want to come and see the garden.
Good.
We need to
Yeah,
head,
same here.
Richard, we need to head north.
We do, yeah, we need to do a trip
Yeah,
for sure.
that's really useful. Are there any other comments? Is there anything else we need to?
I can't
it's
see
just
them, so
some really
if you
good
could read
fit.
them.
No, that's right. I can. Here we go.
Most people just really excited to come and see you.
That's right. Rachel did ask one question about what was successful in the sand garden and what wasn't. If you know, very briefly, are there things that pop in your head that worked, and then what aren't in the sand?
There was a few of the slightly harder succulents that I really wanted to work. Some of the Delospermums and some of the sedums and things that you would assume would love that kind of situation, and only very few of them have survived and done very well. Whereas some of the prairie plants, Echinacea pallida, it grows, it holds its own, and it's really vigorous, and it's actually self-seeding itself around. So a plant that we kind of put in as a bit of we'll give it a go and see if it works, has done fantastically well. And one that I just thought is going to make a carpet. Succulent plant, baking hot, growing in sand, going to be wonderful. It's kind of faded away, so it's not what I expected, but that's good. Makes it interesting.
It's all part of the play, isn't it? That's what I love about gardening. It's the play and the experimenting, and you know, someone once said to me, it's just not an exact science, and I really like that term because I'm not very good at science, so it makes me feel like I can get away with it a bit more.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's about having fun with it. I think gardening. You know, I don't think I'm ever going to be a millionaire doing it, so I'm enjoying what I'm doing. So I think that's what's important.
That's the payoff, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe so.
Thank you so much for tonight, Jack. That's really great, and well done for coping with all those technical issues at the beginning. That was quite something. Yeah, put me on the spot really quickly. But
me too. Thanks for bearing with us. You did great, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Hopefully it was okay after the technical issues.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Have a great evening. Bye.